Hello, welcome everybody. Thank you for being with us virtually today. We're so happy that you could join us. My name is Dulcie Meyer. I'm the Director of Annual and Athletic Giving at the colleges. And before we get started, I just have a few housekeeping tips to share with you. We'd like you to keep your microphones muted to limit the background noise. And we'll use the chat feature at the bottom of your screen, and we'd like to answer every question we can, and we'll be sure to follow up the best that we can, and we'll save time at the end of the program for questions. So it is my honor to introduce Pietro Del Fabbro from the Hobart class of 1967. Pietro is a stone artist. He has completed public art installations in New York, South Carolina, District of Columbia, New Jersey, and Italy. Pietro, take it away.
Okay, good morning. So you can put the first slide up, Dulcie.
Sure thing.
So first of all, I want to say hello to everybody. It's really wonderful to see you all. And I want to give a special shout out to Dresden, Germany, where my good friend Stephen Anos and Anna are coming, joining us. So I thought it'd be appropriate to start this lecture today with a pop quiz, since we're in an academic environment. We always feared those pop quizzes, but you're going to get one right now. So there are two major military holidays in America: Veterans Day and Memorial Day. And the question is to you, what two major U.S. events are related to those two holidays? So Veterans Day and Memorial Day. So just think about it for a moment and then I'll give you the answer. I know I could not have answered that question a few years ago. So as you look at this photograph, you may have the answer to one of the dates. So Veterans Day is related to World War I, and Memorial Day, which most people don't know, is a Civil War holiday. And people often ask me, why is this memorial, this National Civil War Memorial in Waterloo? There's been no battles here. It doesn't really make a lot of sense until you know that in 1966, Lyndon Johnson and Nelson Rockefeller declared Waterloo the birthplace of Memorial Day. And then subsequently, the US Congress created legislation, signed legislation that certified that. So it was appropriate that there be a national memorial to the Civil War, to Memorial Day in Waterloo. This particular photograph is one of my favorites. It's the procession in 2008 to the dedication of the memorial. And for those of you that are familiar with 5 and 20, which goes right by Hobart and about 4 miles east, you would come to, about 4 miles east, you would come to this spot in the middle of Waterloo. This is 5 and 20. And if you were to turn around and go the other direction, in about a mile, you'd be in Seneca Falls. And if you were to proceed up to the stoplight in front of you and turn left, you would go down to the waterfront. And one of my big surprises in this project was that there was a waterfront in Waterloo. I had no idea because I had sped through Waterloo many times when I was at Hobart. My parents would take us down to Skinny Atlas to Krebs for dinner, and that was all I knew of Waterloo. It's the town right next to Geneva. So right now we're going to follow this procession. I should say, because of the Memorial Day designation for Waterloo, there's a lot of reenacting that goes on in Waterloo every day at Memorial Day, and groups come from all over the country. So it's a really big deal. And so now we're going to follow this procession and turn left at the light, and then we'll go to the next slide. So this is the site plan that I submitted to the committee to show them my concept of what the memorial would be. And there's a little story that's interesting to tell here. So when I came to the first meeting, I only knew one person that was sitting around the table. And they asked me, of course, well, what do you have in mind, Pietro? And I said, well, I can't answer that question unless you tell me where you want this to be. And before I walked into that room, I was sure they were going to just give me a little spot down. They have a park called Lafayette Park in the village that has some military memorials. And they said, no, that's not what we're going to do. We're going to give you an island to work with. And I said, an island? That's like the dream of all public artists, is to have a large property to work with, but it also gives a very large responsibility. So the concept that I showed them, you can see here. And so the island is a really interesting island. Route 96 goes across the base of it, you can see. And if you follow that to the left for about 30 miles, you'd come to Cornell in Ithaca. And the island is surrounded by lock number 4 on the left for the Cayuga and Seneca Canal. This connects the 2 largest lakes and the Finger Lakes so that ships can come out of Seneca Lake and go through this lock and into the Erie Canal, which is, this canal is part of the Erie Canal system. On the other side of the street is our property. And the concept was to recognize, first of all, the 58 soldiers from the Civil War in Waterloo who died. And my idea was to create individual cenotaphs. Cenotaph is means empty tomb. It's a Mediterranean device from ancient history. And you can see them, especially in Florence, there's a lot of cenotaphs in the buildings. But if you look now at the little squares on the island, those are the cenotaphs that are spread around the island, and we'll see photos of that in a moment. And then in the center, were the grove of cedar trees, all the little green circles. Those indicate the enclosure for what is known as the Starstone, and we'll talk a lot about that, but that's the central feature of the project. That stone is made of Danby marble from Vermont, and we placed 620 stars on that in memory of the 620,000 soldiers who died in the war. So we can go to the next slide. So when you are going on Route 96 and crossing the canal and then the race, this is the entrance sign to the memorial. And you can see some of the cenotaphs on the left, and the race, which goes into a turbine to the right, is just behind the sign. So you can go to the next slide, please. So this is a 360-degree view, and I should mention that Michelle Calabro, one of my good friends and an art scholar from William Smith, came to the island and took a lot of photographs and lived on the island for the weekend. If you look in the grove of trees in the center right, you'll see there's a tent there. And that's where she lived while she was working on the photography. And in the middle background is the turbine house for the canal. But this gives you a sense of the layout of the property. Next slide. This is a side view of the enclosure for the Starstone, and the wall on the left has the entrance portal in it that we'll see in a moment. We're really fortunate because there's a lot of beautiful mature trees along the race, and you can see them marching down the property to the right. So next slide. So here's their frontal view of the portal and the Starstone. The Starstone is, as I said before, is made of Danby marble from Danby, Vermont. And that quarry is the same quarry that most of the important historic buildings in Washington were made from. If you look at the Supreme Court, that's Danby marble. If you go to Arlington Cemetery, that's all Danby marble. And then the portal in the foreground is it's made from Indiana limestone. And the quarry that came from is the same quarry that the repair work was done on the Pentagon for 9/11. So my concept with the portal, you'll notice that the two columns are the same height and they're joined together by the lintel, so they're unified, but they're very different in their capitals. And the message I was trying to convey is the country, of course, had been terribly split up during the war. And when it was brought back together, it doesn't come back the same as it was before. Even though it's unified, it's still not the same. It'll never be the same as it was. And you can go to the next slide, please. Now, one of the great gifts for sculptors is night lighting. If you're familiar with displaying stone sculpture in particular, you know that lighting is absolutely essential to making it work properly. And so I spent a lot of time working on lighting. This is another picture by Michelle. And you can see the difference. There's no way you can equal the effect of displaying stone with day lighting compared to night lighting. She really picked a perfect moment while we still had the twilight sky behind and the beginning of the illumination at night. Next slide. And then this is a 360 view. You can see now Michelle's tent is illuminated in the middle of the grove on the horizon there. And there's the canal house on the left. And the boats go through all the time. If you were there right now, which is normally we would be standing right there, you would see boats and small ships even going through the canal lock. Okay, next slide. And then there's a little opening in the portal wall, and this lamp burns there in the evening as part of the illumination. And if we look at the next slide, you'll see that lamp is dedicated to one of the reenactors who was very active in helping the project move forward. And that lamp is carried in his memory on the Friday before every Memorial Day. There's an illumination ceremony at the site, and one of the reenactor units carries that lamp in his memory. Next slide. Here again, you can see the miraculous effect of lighting at night. And you can appreciate now the beautiful mature trees that are on the property. So the only trees we added are the short arborvitae you see around the Starstone on the right. Otherwise, we were really blessed with the natural environment on the property. Next slide. Now, one of the main things I do in my public art projects is insist that the clients, the patrons, participate in the work, because I deeply believe that without their physical ownership of the project, it's just not the same experience. And once I can corral them into doing that, they really understand. It's a very powerful experience. And so here, this is my outdoor studio near the canal. And I demonstrated to each of the citizens. So we asked 58 of the citizens of the town to create one of the cenotaphs, and they were given a book that had a little biography of each of the 58 men that we put together by going down and doing research in the National Archives in Washington. So we really knew who each of these men were. And here I am showing one of the people who's about to cut the stone on the left. He's been watching me how I break up the stone and work with the chisel. So you can go to the next slide, please. Now here's the Starstone. So people, while we were working on the project, anyone from the town could come down and with a star drill put a divot incision in the marble. It takes about 3 minutes to do that, and then that would be followed by putting gold leaf, 24 karat gold leaf into into the star. This is Michelle, the photographer, working on gilding it on this day. This was the same weekend she was down doing the photography. Next slide. So this is gives you a close-up view of the process. So people ask, well, how did you decide where all the stars would go? And I said, well, the main thing I wanted was the randomness that you see in the sky. You know, stars are round. Everyone thinks of stars as the pointed stars you see on a flag, but stars are actually round when you see them, aren't they? Stars in the sky. And so I just told whoever came, I said, you put it where you want it. I'm not going to tell you where to do it. And it really created a totally naturalistic effect of a sky. So this is the first star that was placed by myself and Karen Cleveland, who was the director of the project, and Bill, who was a real godsend. He's a local citizen and a veteran also, like myself. And he has been the caretaker of this project ever since 2008. And all the beauty that you see in the photographs, the natural beauty, is a result of all his hard work. So here was the first star. Okay, next. And I should mention that after the person did the star, then that went into a logbook, so they can always go online and find where their star was if they ever come back to see where it is. Now here's the finished Starstone. You can see the effect of the whiteness of the Danby marble, and then that very naturalistic look of Indiana limestone. Next slide, please. And this is Karen. Karen was the director of the project. And one of the things that's been really gratifying to us who are involved in the project is it's become a very active destination for people involved in Civil War history, reenactors and veterans. And in this case, this was a ceremony that she was holding with, she's the president of the national group called the Daughters of the Union Veterans. The next slide. And here's another group that came to the memorial. This is a member of the Gettysburg Blues. It's really interesting. I never knew a reenactor before this experience, and I really met a lot of wonderful people. And this in the background is a band, a reenactor band, Civil War period. Next slide. So this is the daughters who come annually to the project, and this was one of their ceremonies. And I meant to ask Karen, why is there a French flag there? I have to find that out. I figure one of you are going to ask that question, and I never got to that. But Karen would know the answer to that right away. But anyway, this is typical of the kind of thing that you'll see on random days at the memorial. And then on Memorial Day every year, there's a gigantic camp set up of reenactors from all over the country. So next slide, please. And a very interesting story here. So this is one of the cenotaphs, and you can see there is a little plaque that's placed at the bottom of each one that identifies the name of the veteran, of the soldier, and the day he died and where he died. It's very poignant as you go around and look at the ages. Some go down to as low as 17. And I've never been able to imagine what it would be like to leave a small village like this and just head into the cataclysm of the Civil War and maybe never come back. But when you walk around and see the ages, it's very poignant to think about that. Anyway, I received a phone call 2 years after the project was finished, and it was from John Kiley, and he's asking me, is this my great-great-grandfather that you have in your project? And I said, well, what's his name? And he said, well, it's John Kiley. And I said, well, tell me a little more. And then we figured out, yeah, that's your grandfather. I said, well, how'd you know about that? And he said, his daughter was assigned to do a project on their ancestors. And she was going through the internet because she's a kid, she knows how to do this stuff. And she found our website, and she found her great-great-great-grandfather. And that's how it all happened. And then subsequently, as John and I became friends, or Rick, actually Rick is the modern Kylie, he said he wanted to find another, the brother of John. He knew he was in Petersburg, but he couldn't find his grave. And I subsequently called down there and we found his grave, and Rick and I went down and visited that. So these are the kind of things that have come out of the project. It's really been a very gratifying experience. And anyway, one of my friends, this is a moment when Rose was being placed for the ceremony on Friday of Memorial Day weekend. And this is Laura Motes is placing the rose. And you can see that the project put the wreath and then the rose is placed by Laura. Okay, next slide. So this brings us to probably the most fascinating, I think for most people, object in the memorial. This is the NorthSouth Cenotaph. And when we were talking about how we could truly turn this into a very relevant national project, the idea came up, well, let's ask the 36 states that were in the Union at the end of the Civil War to send up stone and tell them what we're doing and send a relevant stone from their state. And each of the people at the table was assigned to find someone in each of those states, an important person. And so we received stones from museums, and I couldn't believe some of the things that we received. But you can go on the website, which is AmericanCivilWarMemorial.com, and there's a chart as to which of the stones is from where, and with the story. The stories are really interesting. And so this is the NorthSouth Cenotaph. And you can see some of the individual cenotaphs from the distance. And there's Bill's work with the landscape. You can see the kind of job he does. Next, please. So this is something that was really important to all of us. You may be aware that the first Women's Rights Convention was held in 1848 in Seneca Falls and Waterloo. They're two towns that are very close to each other, just a mile apart. And that whole weekend of meetings took place in both towns, and they're both involved in that whole historical event. And out of that project came the Declaration of Sentiments, which when I first read it after visiting the museum in Seneca Falls, just down the road, it's really an amazing document. You want to take a look at it. Anyway, we decided right away that there would be a women's memorial to the women of the Civil War in the project, and that's what you're seeing here right next to the young girl. And what's more, we asked a family that had this happened to have 4 generations of women and girls and kids and babies ready to make a cenotaph. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see that in action. So this was maybe the most amazing thing I saw the whole time we were working on this over 2 summers. Was the great-grandmother rather, has just risen from her wheelchair to take a hammer, and her great grandchild is holding the chisel. I mean, that was some moment. And she did it. She worked all the way around that stone. I mean, you must imagine how hard it is to do this. And someone in her condition, that was a miracle. The next slide, please. So this is a morning shot of the memorial with the sun just rising. And you'll notice here, one of the great fears that a public artist has is that if you're working on a large project like this, all the foundations and footings have really disturbed the lawns. And you can see there's straw wherever we're trying to grow grass, and we're just counting the days till the dedication. But we made it, as you'll see. The next slide, please. And here you can see the lawn came together. This is all, Bill does all this. I mean, it's amazing what he does. So the project, we learned quickly that we could turn it into an astronomical instrument. And so we lined up all the cenotaphs to face due south, where all these young men who died, where they headed into the war. And the central axis of the project, which is created by the flagpole, the NorthSouth Cenotaph, and then you can see the Starstone in the distance. Those are all on the natural axis of north and south. And so logic would say that on certain times each day, there would be a noon mark somewhere. Let me just stop it for a second and explain what a noon mark is. So before people had watches and clocks, they needed to know when it was time to break for lunch. And so if you have a sundial type instrument, you can mark it for when noon will be, and then the town would ring the bells. So we created the same type of instrument, but on a much larger scale. So we figured that the noon mark on the winter solstice would land on the Starstone. And if you go to the next slide, you can see how this is going to work. So this is another one of Michelle's 360 views. So if you look down the brick walk, you can see the north-south axis, the flagpoles in the distance, and that is what is known as a gnomon in a sundial. Gnomon is the vertical piece that casts the shadow. And then you can see the north-south cenotaph, and straight down the sidewalk would be the Starstone, which, because it's 360, would then be around and in line with that sidewalk. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see what happened on winter solstice. And we were going like, whoa, that's pretty good. So, so if it were back in the year 1400 or 1300, this would be time for lunch on December 21st. Next slide, please. So one of the other things I really feature in my public artwork is the use of literary fragments, which I think add a whole different element to the projects. And this is my favorite one. There's about 5 different quotations in this project spread around the property, but this one really became very dear to me. This is from Stephen Vincent Benet's John Brown's Body. It's a long poem that won the Pulitzer Prize in 1929. And just take a moment and read that. It's just, I won't say any more, just read it. So after we're done today, sometime this afternoon or this evening, you're going to receive a poem from me, from the school. And it, if you go to the next slide, if you look at, now here's a good concise bringing together of the different elements of the project. And I think it's very clear that stone is very much the persona that I try to exude. I'm sort of a lithic man, but stone's a very spiritual, artistic material. And so people ask me, what's in your head when you're designing a project like this? And I hand them the poem that you're going to get this evening, because I think it really sums up what's in my head and what I try to achieve with my stonework. So Dulcie will now go to taking questions, and thank you very much for your attention. And I do hope that someday you'll come and enjoy seeing the project live. Okay.
Yeah, so if anybody has any questions, feel free to pop them into the chat. Right now, there aren't any questions that I can see, but I'm sure there's probably one or two questions that some of you might be thinking about.
Yeah, and if, they can just say them out loud too if they want to. That's fine.
Sure.
Sometimes you do such a good job that, hey, you don't even have to answer any questions.
Great.
Let's see.
I have to say hi to Joel Friedman.
Oh yeah, go ahead if you say so hello to each other, sure.
Hi, Joel. I met you when I was 16 at Hobart for spring reunion. I hope you're well. I can't hear you, Joel. Oh, shoot.
Oh.
You're right. I was actually going to compliment Pietro on the monument. Coming back from the reunion, the 50th reunion, Marilyn and I stopped off at the memorial, and it was really very moving and a beautiful job. I also enjoyed your book.
Oh, thank you. Yes. Yeah, after the project, there was so many stories we learned about at the National Archives about these men. There was one story I just had to turn into a novel, and that's what my book Salvage Station is based around.
Yeah, I enjoyed your book too.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, we can actually post the link to Pietro's book. So if people wanted to check that out, they certainly can. The book's available at the college's bookstore. There is a question in the chat, and somebody's wondering, how long does it take to complete a project like this one, Pietro?
Yeah, usually from the beginning to the end, it's about 4 or 5 years. The first step is getting to know the townspeople. It's really critical to know the clients and the patrons. And the hardest part of my craft, I guess, is educating them about, first about veterans. This is a veterans project. And then about the possibilities of their participation. And so the summer before this was finished, we held all the sculpting workshops where people were hitting their hammers. I mean, it's just music to my ears. They really, everyone really gets into it and they'll never forget it. And that's the way any art project should be, I believe. But so it's about, it can be 2 3 years. I would say normally about 3 to 4.
That's great.
I mean, just ordering the materials and getting them trucked in from Indiana and Vermont, that's a major time there, sawing it, period. All right, next.
Let's see.
I remember enjoying you and Maria dancing at the last reunion.
Yes.
Dulcie too.
Yeah, and Robin Platten too. He's out there. He's at Barnegat Light today. Yeah.
There's Steve from Germany.
Oh yeah, Steve, how you doing?
Yeah, it's good to see you again.
Yeah, is Anna with you?
Yeah, so Anna's still. Let me go. Give me a second. I'll go snag her to say hi.
Yeah. So Steve is a biochemist working in Dresden, and he hosted us about 1.5 years ago. We had a really great visit. If you haven't been to Dresden, Germany, you want to go. It's
Hi,
like
Anna.
in the lost
Hi.
world. Hello, Anna, you there?
Yeah, she's
Yeah.
there.
Hey, how you doing? This is great. I'm talking to Dresden. They're coming from all over the world. Anyone else a really long ways away?
They take the prize, I think.
Yeah, that's got to be the prize. So you win the prize. So Steve, we expect you to come to your reunion next time it's safe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we wanted to come, but with travel restrictions and all this stuff, it's been
Right. No, there's no way to do it right now. But,
yeah.
we're getting our house in order with all the shots.
Yep.
So there's a question in the chat asking, Pedro, did you say that Danby marble was used on all the tombstones at Arlington Cemetery?
Yes, Danby marble is the marble that's used in Arlington Cemetery and most of the major buildings around the mall. It's probably the best sculpting and architectural marble in America. And Indiana limestone is the world grade limestone used around the world. It's really an important stone. By the way, if you like that poem you're going to read tonight, let me know what you think of it. I'm crazy about it. It's like, you'll understand me much better once you read it.
I can attest to that. That is very true.
We all need a poem where you can just say, just read this poem, then you'll know me.
Yeah.
So,
Any other questions for Pietro?
Yeah, so I just had one. When you're putting together like the plan, like you do your research and you get to know the area and all this type of thing that you have to do before you kind of start off one of these projects. But I mean, how much of the, like when you're designing basically the layout of what your, the structures you're going to put up, or the actual, the monuments themselves, how much of this comes from kind of planning in advance, and how much of it is just, as you go, decide to kind of work in, the new information you've learned or the new history you've learned along the way?
it's usually about half and half. So half of the project is really set in stone, so to speak. But also as a creative artist, that when you're working and opening up a project, whether it's a painting, a drawing, or something as complicated as this, you're going to learn things as you go. So the NorthSouth Cenotaph came quite a way down the road, the idea for that. And it just seems such a natural thing to do. When you go and read the stories of those stones, you'll see. I don't know, there's a famous book called Confederates in the Attic. It's a really great book to read about the South today, and how it still reacts to the Civil War. And one of the chapters are each of the Confederate states. And this the chapter for Mississippi is from a museum in Vicksburg, and they sent us a brick from their museum that was knocked off the courthouse during the firing from the river. And it actually, that courthouse was built by slaves just before the war began. And in the brick, you can see the slaves' fingerprints, and that is in the Starstone. So those are the kind of things that came out of this. This was really a great transformation when we started that the NorthSouth Cenotaph project.
Great. Wow. Well, we appreciate everybody being here. And like Pietro said, you'll be getting an email from me with a link to the poem that Pietro has referenced several times, and we do hope you enjoy it. And I'll copy Pietro you on this message so that if people do have feedback for you, they can certainly just reply back to you directly.
Yeah, you can maybe just put my email there, or website, whatever you want to do.
Yep.
If you really like it. Don't let me know if you don't like it. You're gonna like it. I know you. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. This is a great thrill, and I've been doing this for about 4 years now, I guess, with live. So I hope that we see all you live next year. How's that sound?
Right.
Okay. Ciao.